Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer. For this video, we are going to be going over 9 more fun and overpowered builds that you could use for the DLC. And honestly, these are an absolute blast to use. These are 9 ones that I had a lot of fun using, that I took on different bosses. We're going to start here with a Colossal Faith build. Well, this is going to be a Strength and Faith build. What are we using? We're using Divonia's Hammer, which got a buff in the latest patch, and we're also using the Anvil Hammer because they combo well together. You're going to end up with 3 damage types, but there's a lot of physical damage to be had here, and the jump attacks do solid damage. And the whole concept here is going to be to get as many jump attacks as you can get in. We're taking on Radahn here, the final boss of the DLC. See if you can get some poise damage in there, and then each jump attack is going to do around 3,000 damage as well. Quick shout out to NordVPN. It's what I've been using for threat protection. With so many scam emails and everything going on now and all these links and everything, it's nice having that extra threat protection as well as the VPN itself. If you need a discount on it, it's in the description below and you can help support the channel out as well. And we're back to this build, which is really amazing for jump attacks. I like the combination here, and then using the Ash of War on Divonia's Hammer as the main Ash of War is better here too, because holy damage is really good in DLC, and after that buff in the latest patch, the weapon is quite good. Also, now that everybody's got a chance since the latest patch to take on Radahn, I'm curious as to your thoughts. What did you think about the nerfs? I know I asked this in another video, but I'm really curious if you fought him a couple times now, what you think. I think the fight is a little bit too easier than it should be now. Some of the stuff didn't need to be nerfed. This is on New Game Plus with DLC Plus, but if you're on New Game Plus 7, I could understand liking the nerfs a lot more because it's going to matter more then. As far as early journeys now, though, I don't think he's one of the most difficult bosses in From Software's history if you're factoring in New Game or New Game Plus. Speaking of other From Software games, if you haven't checked it out, I made an early game Bloodborne guide. If you haven't started Bloodborne and you have PlayStation, you got to check out that game. It's an older game, but it really is a gem of a game. I can't wait for them to remaster it. Hopefully someday they do. Definitely be sure to check that out in the description below after this video. But I wanted to mention that because I feel like Orphan of Kos, Ishin, definitely more challenging for me now than Prime Concert Radahn. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have Divonia's Hammer plus 10. We have the Anvil Hammer plus 10 preferably. We have the Erdtree Seal. You can check out the armor set here. Part of Rakshasa set and Grave Bird for jump attacks. Claw Talisman. Shard of Alexander. We have the Godfrey Icon. Arsenal Charm plus 1. Green Burst Crystal tier and Faith tier 2. And now let's jump into stats for this build. By the way, the Godfrey Icon is for the Ash of War on Divonia's Hammer. It's going to be awesome with that. You're going to get a lot of extra damage when you charge it. We have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 35 Endurance. We have 50 Strength, 75 you two-hand anything, 30 Faith. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blessings of the Erdtree. And next up here, we have the all Red Lightning build. This is an awesome build for, well, Red Lightning. We're going to be using the Flowerstone Gavel, Flower Dragon Bolt, which is going to scale entirely with your Arcane stat. And then we're going to be using the Dragon Communion Seal with a Gravelstone Seal in our offhand to use Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. And that's a lot of damage here. We ended up with 11,000 damage there. And the Flowerstone Gavel, we're getting good damage from that as well because we've got a decent amount of Arcane we've invested in. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know for this one. And we have the Flowerstone Gavel plus 10 preferably. We have the Dragon Communion Seal plus 10, and then we have the Gravelstone Seal plus 25. We're using that for the boost. We have the Rakshasa set on Divine Beast Head for some extra stats. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon. Then we have the Lightning tier and Faith tier 2. And for stats on this build, we are going to have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 20 Strength, 19 Dexterity, a little bit extra stats from the Divine Beast Helm. We have 43 Faith and 50 Arcane. We're using Golden Vow, Halashabiri, and then we have Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. All right, next up here is the Cleaver build. This is going to be a dual Cleaver build. We are going to be using the Putrescent Cleaver as well as the Omen Cleaver in combination. We're going to also have a dual Frost build here that's going to build up Frost fast. And the concept here is quite simple. You're going to use the dual move set, the L1s or the LBs if you're on Xbox, and then you're going to mix in the Ash of War on the Putrescent Cleaver to get in some successive attack damage and a good amount of physical damage. And of course, always you'll be building up Frost. The best thing about this build is going to be the Ash of War and the Putrescent Cleaver, but the Omen Cleaver we have in Cold Affinity with Chilling Mist, so when you're using those L1s or LBs or the combination move set, you can build up Frost fast and get a lot of physical damage in there too. And all around, it makes for a really good build. It's going to be on the slower side because you have heavier weapons ultimately, but when you have the opportunity to get in that Ash of War, if you follow up with the charge attack on the Ash of War, use the Ash of War and then follow up with right trigger or R2, you're going to get a lot of successive attack damage and physical damage. This ultimately makes for a very fun build that's really enjoyable around the Putrescent Cleaver, while also giving it a little bit better Frost build up having the Omen Cleaver in the offhand, because by itself it's not the best at building up Frost with only a little bit of innate Frost on it. Yeah, so if you use only the Ash, you're more likely to take down the boss before you proc Frost, but if you use this combination, you'll be able to proc Frost and then take advantage of the debuff and then hit them really hard with the Putrescent Cleaver. There it is right there. The extra spinning attack is awesome. All around, a very fun weapon that you get from the Remembrance of the Putrescent Knight in the DLC. This is a really cool one to try out. I recommend it for sure. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Putrescent's Cleaver plus 10. We have the Omen Cleaver in Cold Affinity with Chilling Mist. We have any seal for buffs the Rakshasa set on. We have Millicent's Prosthesis, Shard of Alexander, Arsenal's Arm plus 1, or Greatjar's Arsenal if you have it, Winged Sword Insignia, or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia if you have that, it's better, Thorny Tear, and Faith Tear. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 18 Mind, 30 Endurance, 40 Strength, 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier, and then for our buffs, we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for some extra damage on this build. And next one up here is the Poison Backhand Blades build. Now, this build particularly, I'm not a huge fan of poison builds, but people always ask me to make poison builds, so I decided to make one here. It does good damage, and you can proc poison pretty fast, but once again, poison is a slow way to defeat a boss. Yeah, Rot is typically better because the damage tick down is substantially more, and then Deadly Poison, like if you're using the Venomous Fangs, they're going to be better too. With that said, though, we can proc extra damage with Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, and the Backhand Blades are a quick way to build up poison. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, because if you're watching this video to this point and you enjoy Elden Ring builds, there's going to be a lot more where that comes from. And also, we're going to be covering other From Software games and other games in the future too. I'm looking forward to it. If you want to comment what you're currently playing, I'm curious as to your thoughts on that as well. By the way, I've never had this dragon travel this far and give me this much of a hard time. This was absolutely insane. This dragon literally went as far away as it possibly could and then just stood up there for a while, and it was pretty wild. I honestly, most of the time, he goes in the other direction, but I guess he can end up on this rock, and then he runs away from me again. But it's alright, we got a slow tick. He's actually only taking 12 damage per tick. This is why I don't like poison builds that much. Now, granted, he doesn't have an insanely high health pool, but 12 damage per tick feels really low to me. Poison in general, Deadly Poison's going to be better, Rot's going to be better. Nevertheless, still a fun build. Let's jump into equipment and stats for this one. And we have the Poison Backhand Blades, of course. Any seal for buffs, we have the Rakshasa set. There's one mistake here I'm going to mention real quick. We have the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. We have the Shard of Alexander. You do not need the Arsenal Charms plus 1. That was there by accident. You could use Winged Sword Insignia or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia. Millicent's Prosthesis, Thorny Tear, and Faith Tear. And let's jump into stats for this one. We have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 26 Endurance, 15 Strength, 45 Dexterity, and 45 Arcane, so we can get a decent amount of Poison build up, 25 Faith with the Faith here, and as usual, we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. And next up, we're going to show off Moog real quick, and we are going to use Guts Greatsword with the Gravity Spin, and this does a lot of damage. I didn't really use this yet with Guts Greatsword. It's amazing with this, honestly. We got almost 9,000 damage there, and it could build up bleed really fast, too. This is one I highly recommend trying out. It also gives you an insane amount of hyper armor. The spinning gravity thrust works really well. The fact that you could put this on a Colossal is insane because it could build up successive attack damage throughout the Ash of War while building up bleed fast too. Probably a favorite Ash of War for a lot of people because it's a lot of fun to use, and the fact that it has Lion's Claw level of hyper armor is absolutely crazy. It's awesome. Try this one out for sure if you haven't tried out Spinning Gravity Thrust yet. Goes really well with Guts Greatsword in Blood Affinity or in Cold Affinity works too. If you're looking to have fun, this is definitely one to look into. Pretty much all the ones on this list, but I really love this one. It does a lot of damage. Let's jump into equipment here. We have the Blood Guts Greatsword, of course. We have Spinning Gravity Thrust, any seal for buffs. We have the Rakshasa set on. We have Millicent's Prosthesis, Shard of Alexander, Arsenal Charm plus 1, or Greatjar's Arsenal, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny Tear, Faith Tear. We're using Moog Shackle to stun the boss. Can add the white mask for even more damage. For me personally, it just doesn't really go with any of the armor sets in the game, but it'll add 10% more damage. We have 60 Vigor, 18 Mind, 30 Endurance, 40 Strength, 60 when we two-hand this. We have 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, Golden Vow, and Flame Grip Strength. And next up here, we have the Cold Heavy Hitter build. This is pretty awesome. We're going to highlight the Sword Lance a little bit as this video goes on because I really enjoy the Sword Lance. This one does a lot of damage too. This is Cold Affinity Royal Knight's Resolve. Now, most bosses, you would end up getting a Frost proc in here. The Draconic Tree Sentinel just has high resistances against it, but overall, it's a really good build if you want a lot of damage, Frost procs, and a good amount of Pierce damage as well. The Sword Lance is an excellent weapon. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Cold Sword Lance with Royal Knight's Resolve. We have any seal for buffs. We're using the Rakshasa set again. We have the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. We have the Axe Talisman. We also have the Blade of Mercy. That's excellent here. Ritual Sword Talisman. And then we have the Spike Crack tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats on this build, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance. We have 60 Strength. We have 20 Intelligence. And then we have 25 Faith with the Faith tier. When you two-hand this, by the way, you're going to have around 90 Strength, which is awesome. And of course, we're going to be using Golden Vow, Flame Grip Strength as well. And the Rakshasa set, we always are going to hit over 51 poise, which is cool too. And now we have the double holy build. I wanted to check out the Gargoyle's Black Blade again because it does a lot of holy damage to see if it was good in DLC. I ended up taking on this dragon to see if it made for a good combination build with the Great Sword of Damnation, and they actually go really well together. They have a combination moveset, and they both have two cool Ashes of War. One's going to be much better for PvP, and that's going to be the Great Sword of Damnation, and then the other one's going to be much better for PvE if you switch to it, and that's the Gargoyle's Black Blade, which can stack up a ton of holy damage and percentage damage too. Alright, let's get into critical hit here with the Great Sword of Damnation. See how much damage that does. Almost 10,000 damage. That's pretty great. And then we're going to use that Ash of War. And then, of course, we could always fall back if we're at a range to the Gargoyle's Black Blade for some decent range damage as well. And there it is. We get another hit in there for massive damage, over 7,000 damage. This Ash of War is actually going to be really underrated for the DLC because it's kind of like a Blasphemous Blade version of holy damage. So you could take this into a lot of bosses in DLC and probably get good damage because holy damage is a great type for Shadow of the Erdtree. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Great Sword of Damnation, plus 10 preferably. We have the Gargoyle's Black Blade, plus 10 preferably as well. We have any seal for buffs. We are using the Rakshasa set and Divine Beast Head for some extra stats. Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Arsenal Charm plus 1, or Great Jar's Arsenal if you have it, Holy Tier, and Faith Tier too. And now let's jump into stats for this awesome build. I like this one a lot. We have 60 Vigor, 18 Mind, 28 Endurance. We have 49 Strength. We have 55 Faith with the Faith Tier here, 19 Dexterity. We hit around 62 poise, and for this build, we're going to be using Golden Vow and Halashabriri to get some extra damage for the holy part of the weapon. And next up here, we're going to have two builds for the Sword Lance, both faith-based. For the first one here, we have the Sacred Lance. We're using aspects of the Crucible Wings, and this does a lot of damage with the Sword Lance. It's really a great weapon for it. I'm finding it to be a very well-rounded weapon. Now, you could throw in incantations too, but for me personally, it's a little bit difficult on this boss specifically because I have a hard time with this boss's moveset. This is my least favorite boss in the entire DLC. I am not a fan of him. He is weak to Holy though, so that's a plus for us. Yeah, I get beat up a little bit here at the end, but if you want to add in incantations, use the Dry Leaf Seal, and then you could use stuff like Multi-Layered Ring of Light, and even the Golden Arcs would fit well for this build. Pretty much anything that does holy damage would fit this build perfectly. Alright, last question for you guys. What is your favorite DLC boss in Shadow of the Erdtree, in Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree? And what is your least favorite DLC boss too? What boss do you like the most, and which boss do you like the least? For me, I think Midra is going to be my favorite boss. Ultimately, that is an excellent fight, and Commander Gaius is going to be my least favorite. Alright, in a second here, we're going to jump into equipment stats, everything you need to know. Multi-layered Ringer of Light would be perfect with this build, by the way. It does a lot of holy damage. Jump into equipment. And we have the Sacred Sword Lance with Crucible Wings, of course, Dry Leaf Seal. We have part of the Rakshasa set on, the Exile Hood. It looks cool with this set. We have the Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman. We have the Two-Handed Sword Talisman if you're doing regular attacks. But you can switch this out for a couple of different talismans. You could throw in the Godfrey icon for your incantations. That would be perfect here. And then we have the Holy Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 30 Endurance, 24 Strength, 15 Dexterity, 70 Faith with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow, Halashiriri. We also have Golden Arch, as well as multi-layered Ring of Light too. And the last one on this list is a really fun one. That's going to be the Flame Art Sword Lance with Rain of Fire. This is a good combination. I love this weapon. I'm starting to like it more and more. It's really versatile. Put it in Flame Art, it's good too, and it goes well with Flame Spear. And that's going to be our focus here, to get off Rain of Fire when we can for the massive area of effect damage. Really good for bigger bosses. And then when you get up close, or if you're at a mid-range because you have that extra damage that Flame Spear does from the mid-range point, you could use that as well. Back off and get some damage in. Still wants to call this the Erdtree or Erdtree avatar. I know it's the Erdtree avatar now, but at the same time, I always want to pronounce it a different way. By the way, make sure you get in critical breaks when you fight this boss, because he'll start his next phase, and he has 3 phases in total with less HP. So the fire on our sword is going to give us over 700 AR, I believe, in total, which is really awesome, honestly. And then Rain of Fire, when you can get it off, does a lot more damage now that it's been buffed. Not in the previous patch. I think it was the patch before that they buffed Rain of Fire. It is much better than it was when the DLC launched. Yeah, it actually does pretty good area of effect damage now, and it's chargeable too. You could use it fast like I used it here, or you could charge it up for more damage. Generally, you're going to want to try to charge it. The only thing is, it's easily interruptible by a lot of bosses. Some bosses will miss you and go over your head, but a boss like this one will be able to hit you when you're using the animation. Yeah, if you're taking on Melania and you use Burn of Flame or Rain of Fire, you could actually miss a lot of her attacks. She'll go over your head. There's a lot of bosses like that. This is not one of them. Most of what he does comes up from the ground or ends up hitting you anyway, so you kind of have to time your attacks specifically to certain points when you feel like you have a break in the boss moveset. Alright, and we did get beat up in his second phase here. It was a little bit difficult, but phase 3 is going to be substantially easier for us, thankfully. Overall, I always end up struggling with either phase 2 or phase 3. His moveset for me, since he has very slow combos that go into each other, is always difficult. Speaking of which, by the way, if you haven't used the Sunflower Blossom, the weapon that you get from beating him from his remembrance, I believe that's what it's called. It's an awesome strength faith weapon that does some good holy damage too, that could be good for the DLC. So I recommend definitely taking on this boss and getting that weapon if you like strength and faith builds. Yeah, phase 3 went a lot easier. We ended up stacking up 11,000 damage at one point with Rain of Fire. If you could use Rain of Fire and then get in Flame Spear, it ends up being an awesome combination for massive fire damage. Let's jump into equipment. We have the Flame Art Sword Lance with Flame Spear. We have the Fire Knight Seal for Rain of Fire. We have part of the Rakshasa set in the Exile Hood, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Sword Salesman, Godfrey Icon, Flame Tier, and Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats on this one. We have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 30 Endurance, 24 Strength, 15 Dexterity, 60 Faith. I believe that's going to be 70 with the Faith tier. Probably ran out by now. Golden Vow, Halashiriri, and then we're using Rain of Fire as our main incantation. And thanks for watching this one. I appreciate everybody tuning in to my top 9 fun and overpowered builds for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, and builds that you can even bring back to the base game as well. Be sure to sub if you haven't subbed to this channel yet. There's a lot more Elden Ring content to come. And if you're new to Bloodborne, be sure to check out that guide in the description below. That will get you strong early. I'm going to be doing, most likely, based on the most recent poll, an early game guide for Dark Souls 3 as well. Can't wait for those, and catch you guys in the next video. Have a great day.